Good day. It's September 14th, 2022. Welcome to the show formerly known as Triggered. Now is Corey Morgan Untied, or even just the Corey Morgan Show. So, yes, an hour solid of me ranting, raving, and interviewing guests and covering some stories and events and issues that are, I like to think, important to a lot of folks. So, thanks for joining today, guys. This show being live, as I said, we still get our hiccups now and then, but the great part is we can interact. So I see Ashley, Denise, others joining in there in the comments. Scroll, make use of it, chat with each other, send questions my way. Let's make it interactive and make use of this live aspect of this. As always, I like to ask, keep it somewhat civil. We can get a little worked up. We take our politics seriously, but there's no sense getting personal with each other. I got a good show coming up today. I'm going to have a talk with, he's a lawyer and former MLA, Rob Anderson. And it looks like we're a little blurry, guys. Hopefully our internet picks up here. We just seem to be having a little issue there because the live bugs just like to get us this way, I guess, now and then. Either way, hopefully you can hear me all right. That's the more important part. I look better when I'm a little blurred anyways. So yes, Rob Anderson's going to be coming on. He's with that group, the Free Alberta Strategy, where they put together a number of things, items that they feel can help Alberta distance itself or get clear of Ottawa's reach. And, there's so much discussion, of course, with Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act in the campaign. What does it mean? What is sovereignty? Is it secessionism? Is it just more tinkering and tweaking? Is it possible? Will it be rejected? I don't know. So let's have a little more of an extended discussion on it with somebody who's, not running for the leadership and see what it means, at least from their perspective. But all right, I'm going to start with what's got me going in my ranting today. So I guess we should be happy that Justin Trudeau has begun to start talking about the economy, even if it's clear he still has no understanding whatsoever of how it works. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when he unabashedly stated he doesn't even think about monetary policy at all. There's little doubt that Trudeau would rather remain in blissful ignorance of the economy and stick to his usual shtick of virtue signaling on climate change and COVID-19 and social justice issues. But the growing popularity of Pierre Poilievre obviously just won't allow it. Now, unfortunately, while Trudeau is speaking about inflation and the growing cost of living for Canadians, he still seems to be under the impression that he can borrow and spend our way out of it. His shallow plan to offer $500, or which adds up to $42 a month, to help people struggling under growing rents isn't addressing the lack of housing supply and is typical of his approach to things. He's going to spend $4 billion more to fight inflation. It is like pouring gasoline on a fire to try and put it out. He just doesn't get it. Now, if the government keeps printing money while increasing spending, inflation is going to continue to grow. I mean, this isn't theory. This is economic fact. The Bank of Canada will continue to raise interest rates to combat that inflation, and we're going to be driven into a recession. And while the Trudeau government's been celebrating the nation's economic recovery from the pandemic, the recovery isn't real. We've been living on the credit cards of future generations, and now the bill's becoming due, and it's doing it in the form of unchecked inflation. Our national debt is a staggering $1.2 trillion, and it's growing by $145 million a day. As the interest rates rise, the cost of servicing that debt is going to eat deeply into government budgets. We've been here before. It gets worse, though. I mean, while the government was celebrating job growth, and most of the legacy media outlets amplified that message for them, the job growth was fake. Over 86% of all the new jobs created since 2020 have been in the public sector, which grew by 9.4% in the last couple of years. The private sector only grew by 0.4% in the same period. The government simply opened the hiring floodgates to create the impression of job growth. In reality, this policy is a little more than a work for welfare program. The government would be better served just to send checks out and drop the pretense of hiring people. And how well has that worked out anyway, since hiring all these thousands of civil servants? Well, passport renewals are blocked by months, immigration approvals are backed up by years, and the government can't even get their own payroll right. Whatever those tens of thousands of people the government hired were supposed to be doing, they aren't doing it very well. What the bloating of the civil service is doing is contributing further to inflation on multiple fronts. First, it leads to, of course, increased government spending and borrowing. Secondly, it disrupts the labor market and forces competing private sector employers to raise wages in hopes of drawing employees. That means they need to give raises to their existing employees. Thus, they have to raise their prices for goods and services. And guess what? That adds to the cost of living. It's an ugly cycle. And it's tough for a private sector employer to compete with government jobs that offer high wages, huge pensions, and next to no work required. Now, you know why we're in tough economic times, yet we're in a labor crisis at the same time. Canada's economy is not in good shape, and it's not recovering. It's balanced on a pinhead, shored up with debt and government spending, and it will crash soon. I mean, while Poilievre's valiantly trying to bring this issue to a head, the mainstream media is focused on attacking him. I mean, David Akin went on a bizarre shouting, heckling rampage at a Poilievre press conference. The legacy media outlets will continue to carry Trudeau's water for him until the bitter end. In the meantime, Canadians aren't aware of the economic freight train that's about to hit them. Budgets don't balance themselves, despite what Trudeau claimed. But economies will correct themselves. And when they do, it can and will be ugly. So hold on to your hats, folks. So sorry, yes, I had to kick things off with a bit of a negative note, but that's just the reality that's facing us today. So let's hope that we have realistic economic discussion coming rather than, this pap coming out of our prime minister. All right, we didn't do it last week and I have missed it. Let's check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor, though, and see what's breaking out there in the news. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Where the hell's your tie, Corey?
Hey, I am untied right now. It's just a little short distance from unhinged.
Unbelievable. You know what? One of the things I've missed about having you as the newsroom is the updates on Duke the Wonder Dog. What's he been up to lately? Anything exciting?
Yes, well, Duke and Volstagg and Livy, all three of our goofy hounds in the house, decided to chase a bear away from my beehives the other night at home. It was quite something. They actually made themselves useful for a change.
All right, and you ran back in and got your shotgun, and you didn't kill it though, did you?
No, of course not. That's an absolute last resort. The nice thing with a shotgun is it makes a very loud boom. So if I were to scare a bear away further, it would do that. But while the bear hung around for a little bit, he took off on his own, even without a shot in the air. And thankfully, we do have a fence that my dogs can't get past because as much as they like to talk tough with their barks, I think if they'd actually met the bear, they might have been in for a pretty rough reality check.
Yeah, and there he is.
Yes.
He
came back down a couple hours later behind my house. That's up from my kitchen there.
Well, that's a good sized one. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I love living out there, but we get some critters coming by now and then.
Awesome. Love to see those two glowing eyes in the dark, don't you?
Yeah, that scared the crap out of me, I got to admit. Like I said, I was telling you earlier, I went out with a flashlight at first, were those idiot dogs barking at, a squirrel or something like that, and I'm shining the light in the trees past my fence, and suddenly I see these two eyes, they just glow staring at me, and they're way too far apart to be a squirrel, so that's where I had the reality check.
All right, thank God for Duke. Lots of good stuff on the website already this morning, Corey, and more to come. The United Nations is out with a report today on global climate change, and basically it warns we're all going to die unless a gazillion dollars are spent to try and stop it. Denmark, if you remember, last month stopped vaccinating young children against COVID. Well, now they've issued medical directives not to vaccinate anybody under 50 unless they're in a high risk territory. So I believe Denmark's the first country to announce that sort of sweeping change in vaccinations. The University of Alberta, closer to home, is working on an interesting study on distracted drivers. They figure they can create a machine that will focus on distracted driving and be able to zoom in and find out what's going on. Sounds like a future law enforcement technique to me. Our opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford, has written about Pierre Poilievre and the hypocrisies behind the Justin Trudeau attacks on him. So that's a good read. And we're still waiting for Alberta to figure out what they're doing in terms of Monday, the Queen's funeral. Stuck in my mind today, Corey. Justin Trudeau has announced a national holiday, but you have to be a federal worker to get that off. Provinces have said no. Ontario, Saskatchewan, and BC have all came out yesterday and said no, they weren't going to honor it. And we're still waiting for Alberta to figure it out. Kind of weird, as Jason Kenney is probably the biggest monarchist among all Canadian premiers. And we've got a good column up there from David Creighton on Global TV's David Akin's strange meltdown yesterday at a Pierre Poilievre press conference where he heckled him, interrupted him, and then at the end of it told Pierre to go F himself. So we got a good column on the fact that Poilievre is already causing the media to go crazy. This afternoon, we've got some good stuff coming up, just about to hit publish on a Center of Disease Control story out of the States. Their director has admitted they put out a lot of false information last year. Surprise, surprise. And our old friend Karim Jivraj. You remember him? I did an investigative series on him a while ago on how he ruined the campaign for UCP of Kaylin Ford, who was a rising star within the UCP, basically sabotaged by Jivraj by planting fake stories and just all sorts of nasty stuff. Well, a judge has struck down his defense today, so we've got an update on that. And I think at the end of the day, Kaylin Ford is going to get a lot of money from people like Jivraj and the Press Progress and people like that. So lots of good stuff, Corey, and pleasure talking to you again.
Yes, good to see you. Well, I'll check in again next week. I'm afraid I'll still be untied, but we'll have other things to chat about. It was good to have you back, Dave. Or me
Thanks,
back.
and I'll break in if there's any breaking news in the next hour.
Right on. Thanks, Dave. So yes, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. As always, lots of stuff breaking, lots of stuff covered, all sorts of news items out there. And that's just that reminder. We're covering these things. We're on them. They break. The stories come out so fast. I mean, I skim through them before I start the show to see what's popping up there. And lots on the go. And the reason we can do that, guys, is because you've been subscribing. So again, thank you all for subscribing. We really do appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, get on there. It's $10 a month, $99 for a year. I mean, we're hearing some of that craziness going on with David Eakin. I mean, the mainstream media is losing its mind, their collective minds. They're just, there's not even a pretense of any balance any longer. And it really did surprise me. Again, I mean, David Eakin, we're not talking about a junior reporter here. Yeah, I know I'm blurry, folks. I'm not sure why. Hopefully the internet picks up out here and it'll clean up for you soon. Yeah, well, if you guys can still hear me there, we're going to get that fixed up right away. Okay, that looks a little better. I should be a little prettier for you there. Thanks for your patience, guys. We just had a bit of a technical hiccup, and now I'm back, and it looked to be nice and clear. Again, as I say, we get these challenges when we do live, but I mean, you can't beat live for all the rest of the interactive. I'm seeing you guys commenting and going there. And, Dash Riprock saying these folks are about to lose their jobs under Polyev. And I don't, guys like Aitken again, that surprised me. This wasn't... he's a veteran journalist. He's composed. He's been around the world. He's somebody I respect, even if I don't agree with his stances all the time as a journalist. But that was just bizarre. I mean, to go so unhinged and yelling. And Polyev, yeah, he frustrated people. It's frustrating when you go to a conference and they'll only take one or two questions or no questions. But I mean, when Trudeau pulled that stunt in BC and he wasn't taking any questions, there weren't press members screaming and yelling and heckling and interrupting him when he tried to make his statement. You can complain about it later, but it was just a very, I would expect that out of a junior reporter out of the Toronto Star or something like that. But on David Aitken, it was really quite surprising. And he has apologized. I think he is genuinely embarrassed. I do have big issues with the press and that, and do want to see a lot of changes. But that outburst was just beyond the pale. So we're in some politically heated times, though, and we're seeing some crazy stuff going on and things like that. So let's get on to some more closer to home crazy politics. And that's when shortly I'm going to have my guest on, Rob Anderson. And as I said, he's with the Free Alberta strategy. And again, we could talk about, just what's going on. What is sovereignty? What are we doing? What are we trying? Because there's a lot of, I think, misinformation. A lot of people are getting heated up, and a lot of interpretations of what it might mean. So maybe we get some clarity. So let's bring Rob in and have a conversation about that. Hey there, Rob. Good to see you.
How you doing, Corey? Good to see you.
Yeah, really good, really good. So we got one conservative leadership race out of the way, but we're in the midst of another one. And boy, I've never seen anything like a bunch of candidates all allying themselves to, all jump on the policy of one of their competing candidates like that. And, the main sticking point, I guess, is the Sovereignty Act.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's interesting, to say the least. I think it's important to note that, the vast majority of conservative supporters and conservative members support the Sovereignty Act, which is no small thing. I mean, this was a relatively unknown policy proposal. Frankly, it was completely unknown a year and a half ago. And even, 3 months ago, I'd say, a couple percent might have heard about it. So to get that level of buy-in from Albertans, not just the members of the party, but also conservative supporters, and to see so many other Albertans saying, look, I'd like to see what this is and learn a little bit more and see how it's used in the legislature, and so forth. It's actually quite remarkable. It surprised even me. Probably the only one it didn't surprise was Danielle. But it's been amazing. And the problem the other campaigns have, or the challenge, is that they're essentially campaigning against a policy that their own supporters and members really like, and that puts them in a pretty awkward spot, to say the least. So anyway, we'll see how it goes, and ultimately members will decide, and they'll make the decision of whether we move forward with this.
Yeah. So and you're not speaking for Danielle Smith. You're with the Free Alberta strategy. But
I wanted to just note on that, I am actually taking a leave of absence. I took a leave of absence at the beginning of the campaign from the Free Alberta strategy group to serve as Danielle's campaign chair.
Oh. Okay, well, that's fine too, because I still want to just, it's the same subject matter anyway. So I just want to always be clear on who's speaking in which ways. Anyways, so that Sovereignty Act, one of the main arguments we hear against it from the usual poli-sci professors, from other politicians, is that it's constitutionally impossible, that it's just throwing something out that won't work or can't work. Why do they feel that way?
You know what? I think sometimes, first of all, some of them are just against the concept of Alberta asserting its jurisdictional rights. They're just essentially, they're anti-Albertan, a lot of them, I would say, out east. But that's not the case in Alberta. There's a lot of pro-Alberta people that obviously there are some that aren't in favor of it. But I think what it really is that there is sometimes a knee-jerk reaction to something when you first hear it in the media, and it's spun in a certain way. And I think that as people take a look at the Sovereignty Act, I think we've seen this through the campaign, and I think you'll see it further down the line with the general population as well, is that there's nothing all that controversial about the Sovereignty Act. It basically is just going to say that, look, when Ottawa clearly violates our constitutional jurisdictions as a province, or is clearly violating the rights of Albertans, their charter rights and freedoms, that the legislature is going to be able to gather. And if they so choose, under authority of the Sovereignty Act, they're going to say, look, we're not going to allow that particular policy to be enforced here in Alberta because we believe it's constitutional. And then, we believe it's unconstitutional, what they're doing, what the feds are doing. And then, of course, if the feds disagree with that, well, then they can challenge us in court, and they can take us to court, and we can wrangle there. But right now it's reversed. The feds are constantly doing unconstitutional things and forcing us to do things in the province that we don't want to do. But instead of, we say, okay, well, we're going to write letters, and the response to that is letters, and it's court challenges that take years. And sometimes by the time the court rules on it, it's already, it's already down the creek, and there's nothing we can do about it. Why don't we flip that around a little bit and say, look, it's clearly unconstitutional, for example, there's a whole bunch of examples, but freezing bank accounts in the Emergencies Act, for example, of peaceful protesters. Why would we enforce that among our own people? Why would we do that? It makes no sense to me. Why would we allow illegal gun seizures in our province. Property rights are the purview of the province. They're not the purview of the federal government. And you can go down the line. C-69. The Court of Appeal of Alberta has already said that that's unconstitutional. That's that new environmental assessment agency, essentially, that gives the yes and no to all different projects that, across the country. Well, if we want to build highways here that are more than 75 kilometers long, or we want to build a gravel pit here, or somebody wants to build a different oil and gas development, we don't need the feds to okay that. That is the development of natural resources. That is provincial jurisdiction. The feds can butt out. And if they have a problem with that, they can sue us in court. But we don't need to, especially when it's wholly within Alberta and not crossing provincial lines. We need to defend our jurisdiction and our sovereignty. And that's what the Sovereignty Act is meant to do.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of what I found. What I like about the approach is it's taking the fight to them. We've always been playing defensive. We wait until they do something to us, and then we complain. By then, it's already done, and we're looking in hindsight. And I got a feeling that I guess some of the establishment people within the party, and even Premier Kenney himself, still doesn't seem to understand that it was all of the big talk and small action when it came to Ottawa over the last few years that are a lot of what led to his losing his leadership in the first place. Like, the members want to see something substantial, and they're not going to put up with more letters to Ottawa.
No, the time for that is past. I mean, we've been doing that same thing for decades, actually, not just years, but decades, under an NDP government, under PC governments, UCP. It's all the same. It's all the same. The result is the same. And that is that the feds don't take us seriously. They think that we're just that we're pushovers. And Albertans are reasonable people, and we want to be contributing members of this country in Confederation. We want to be positive in that. And I understand that. I really do. And I think that we can be a positive influence in unity in this country. But I don't think you can really have a functional relationship, whether that's a personal relationship, whether that's a relationship in business, or whether it's a political relationship, where there's not healthy respect. And we have been completely disrespected by Ottawa for decades because we won't stand up for ourselves. Quebec gets respect because they stand up for themselves. We don't. And if we start doing that, we're going to get results. It's not going to happen all at once. Not going to use the Sovereignty Act on every single federal piece of legislation you don't like. But if we draw a line in the sand on some of these very egregious examples of federal intrusion into provincial jurisdiction, over the next year or two, it'll just become evident to Ottawa that they better stay in their own lane, because if they don't, they're going to have a big fight on their hands.
Yeah, well, and some people have described it as something that would bring about secessionism or break things up. And I mean, speaking for myself, as a guy who's been pretty involved in pushing for full independence for a long time, things like this, if the Sovereignty Act works, it would actually reduce secessionism. It would say, look, we can fix things without having to separate from the country. We can stand up for ourselves and address these issues. I mean, it's sort of disingenuous to claim that this is a secessionist sort of move.
No, it's absurd. It's just the opposite of that. It's we do have to use the language sovereignty, because that's what really we're talking about here. We're talking about the provinces have sovereign authority over certain areas in the Constitution, and those sovereign areas of jurisdiction need to be respected for this country to work. And I actually think, and I know, I think Danielle's spoken extensively about this, that the way to unify this country is for not just Alberta to be asserting their sovereign authorities, not just Quebec to assert their sovereign authorities, which is what they do, and we're just essentially following their lead on it. It's for every province in this country to say, look, the federal government needs to get out of these areas. They're not doing a good job. They're violating our constitutional jurisdictions, and they're trying to impose one-size-fits-all approaches on every province across the country. And it's been an abject failure, from healthcare to daycare to everything that they get their tentacles into, frankly, that's provincial in nature. That's a provincial jurisdiction under the Constitution. So this idea that, Pierre Poilievre has been talking about, and I would say Maxime Bernier has been talking about, this idea of decentralization of government, of having the federal role decreased, having the tax pool of the federal government decreased, and then a corresponding increase by the provinces to make sure that they're handling their own money and their own systems in the way they see fit. That is, in my view, and I know in Danielle's view, is the way to actually unify this country, because the way we're doing it right now, we're on a path to break up, I think, in this country if we don't start respecting the rights of our provinces under the Constitution.
Yeah, so going further, and as it kind of shows on the website, kind of in the past too. I mean, it's one thing to say that you have an act saying you won't enforce on constitutional things, but some things have to be changed in order to refuse that enforcement, such as an Alberta provincial police force, which wouldn't take part in, say, gun seizures, or I see, the Independent Banking Act, which could save people's accounts from being seized by a government, as we've seen, and the judicial independence. But those are all separate acts that would be almost kind of little separate battles on their own as well.
That's right, and to be clear, like some of the things proposed by the Free Alberta strategy, certainly some of those ideas have been adopted by several candidates on the campaign, leadership candidates, particularly Danielle, obviously, which is why I chose to support her. But several things have not, and that's the thing. I mean, the Free Alberta Initiative is a think tank, and we came up with some ideas that we think that would work. But to your point, Corey, yes, there are other pieces, and some of the pieces that Danielle's talked about are, and other candidates as well, are the need for a provincial police force, particular for rural enforcement. They wouldn't affect the Calgary City Police or the Edmonton City Police or any of the city police. Those are provincially overseen anyway. But the RCMP is not, and we have our own priorities here in Alberta, in rural Alberta in particular. We need our own provincial police force. She's talked about the need to collect our own taxes provincially. We've got to put that infrastructure in place. That's important to asserting our sovereignty. And then, of course, a pension plan. I mean, that just makes good financial sense. We're sending billions and billions of dollars more into that plan than we're getting back for our seniors. So not only is that asserting sovereignty, that just makes a ton of sense on a dollar and cents basis. So those three things in particular have been kind of adopted by several of the leadership candidates, particularly Danielle. And then that combined with the Sovereignty Act, in my view, is why so many Albertans are looking at that and saying, you know what, that's a strategy that could work. And I think that's why she's having success.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if this could inspire other provinces as well, I mean, this people don't seem to realize that, decentralizing power in an ironic way can bring us closer together, because then we aren't at each other's throats with other things. I love using Switzerland as an example. You got 4 official languages, you got 26 cantons, very decentralized government, a great deal of change. You can travel 50 kilometers and you're into a totally different governing zone, and you don't hear about independence movements in Switzerland. They're all happy in one large diverse group. And the way to do that is to get the central federal government out of the hair of the smaller groups.
Isn't it ironic too that you're absolutely right. And it's ironic because liberals and the woke, I would say the woke left establishment, they all talk about diversity. That's their favorite word. Diversity, diversity, diversity. And that's all fine and good. They're talking, we're a diverse country, multicultural. That's great. And then they kind of hypocritically turn around and say, but when it comes to control of the country, we can't have diversity. We can't possibly let Quebec, Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan run their childcare systems differently or their healthcare systems differently. We need a Canada Health Act, or we need a new federal daycare program that puts conditions on how we run our system here. It's just one thing after the other. Education grants, social grants, everything. They have to get their tentacles into everything. So they're actually very much against diversity when it comes to how people run their lives. And that's, when you're talking about diversity, that's just as important. I mean, we need to respect, Alberta is not Prince Edward Island. Quebec is not BC. Like, we're very different peoples, different cultures, and that's what makes us a great nation. And I think if you really look at, the 25 to 30, 35% of people that in Alberta and also in other provinces that want to have their own independent nation, so to speak, I would say that the thing that drives them to that the most is how fed up they are with how Ottawa deals with their particular province. Isn't that interesting? Because it's not that they have anything against their fellow Canadians. It's not that they don't think BC's not beautiful, the Maritime's not beautiful, and the people there are great when you sit down and have a beer with them. It's none of that. It's always Ottawa. Ottawa is the number one driver of political instability between the provinces, and the most, I would say, the biggest driver of disunity in our country. And so I think that Alberta can lead the way with Quebec, frankly, in making sure that we understand that we are different. Let's embrace those differences, and let's let the provinces govern themselves as much as possible.
Yeah, well, and most of what's being asked are things that other provinces are already doing. I mean, it frustrates me when Alberta tries to assert these sorts of things, we get called extreme. When Quebec does it, then they get indulged. I mean, come on, guys. Let's move on from this double standard.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a double standard, and it's hypocritical in the extreme. And I am always amazed, especially by the individuals that choose to fearmonger on this and choose to say, "Oh, this is a pathway to separation." No, I'm sorry. Asserting your constitutional rights as a province, that's just called leadership and standing up for your people. It's putting Albertans first, as Daniel is always saying. That's to try to equate that with trying to break up the country and that that these proposals are Looney Tunes. What it shows is that there's a lot of people in the media and on the left that make knee-jerk decisions to things, probably because when they were sipping their latte with their buddy down at the coffee shop, or looking at their Twitter feed, they decided that this was a bad idea without even taking a substantial look at it. And I think that Albertans, generally entrepreneurial people, business-friendly people, they're taking a look at this, and they've taken a look at it over the last 3 months, and more are going to take a look over the next 3 months. And I think they're going to quite soon come to the realization that this is actually a really good step in redefining our relationship into a healthy one with Ottawa.
Great. And now, since you are formally now with Daniel Smith's campaign, I want to turn a little bit before I let you go. One of the commenters' question, because this is where the campaign's kind of changed, and I'm really interested in that actually, is Cara Byrne-Clark said, what about dismantling AHS? And I'm not sure if that's what the campaign point was, but was Daniel's taking on at least AHS, which is a huge area. And again, it's really going to stir the hornet's nest, but it really needs to be done. Where's the campaign coming from on that?
Well, AHS, I think your viewers likely talking about the release that was sent out yesterday on AHS reform. And what Daniel's policy on that is just, let's back up. AHS completely failed us during the COVID situation and management that occurred. We needed more ICU capacity. They gave us less. They gave us a bunch of, while they were bonusing their executives, we were having trouble recruiting people to help on the front line, and actually losing people because of their insane policy of firing healthcare workers that didn't agree with them on getting a vaccine, and then taking those individuals and firing them during a pandemic and during a situation where we needed to make sure that we had additional health support and health workers there. It was an absolute, it was crazy. That's the way to say it. Their management was completely dysfunctional. So the first thing that needs to happen is that Daniel has proposed is, look, we need a new AHS CEO. The other one's been let go. Let's make sure we bring someone in with executive experience, who's a healthcare reformer, who is going to get to the bottom of some of the problems in EMS response times, and obviously on the acute care shortage and these types of issues that we've been having. The board needs to be replaced with an interim commissioner that works with the CEO. That interim commissioner would report directly to the Minister of Health and the Premier. And we want a 30-day action plan to give us immediate steps that we can take to staff up and beef up our ICU and hospital bed capacity, so we don't have people on the ground sleeping and being treated on hospital floors as we flow into acute respiratory season here in the fall. And then a 90-day plan on how we're going to permanently decentralize healthcare to the local level, get local professionals and local decision makers involved in the process at the local level, get rid of this ridiculous level of middle management that is just afraid to make good decisions and is butt covering and communications and PR consultants. And that's just garbage. Let's return healthcare to the local level. Let's do it in a thoughtful, business-like fashion. So you don't just rip apart something overnight. But it does need substantial reform. And there are some things that do make sense for the province to handle as a province. But most healthcare delivery, that should be at the very local level and not by some big bureaucracy, because it has failed. It has utterly failed. It needs to be changed and reformed.
Well, I'm glad to see the discussion opened up, and well, the campaign's getting into its final legs. Probably, about half of the members have cast their ballot by now, who are eligible. Not too many undecideds left out there, but still, I mean, you work right to the very end. So, thank you very much for coming on to talk and break that down a little more for us today, because there's just so much different discussion and interpretation on a policy that hasn't even actually been drafted into legislation yet. So,
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that develops.
Yes, thank you, Corey. And I've noted that we've heard of all kinds of great ideas. A campaign should be about ideas. I've never heard of anyone ever requesting that Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre or any of the other candidates running in this race draft their legislation in advance. Of course, that's silly. We'll make sure, Daniel's said time and again, it'll be constitutional, it'll be thoughtful, and it'll be used as a tool strategically to take on Ottawa when they egregiously violate our constitutional position or constitutional rights. And looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing how that rolls out.
Right on. Okay. Well, we'll talk again soon, I'm sure. I'll let you get back to work. You guys got a lot to do before the end of this.
Thanks, Corey. Take care.
Okay. Thank you. So that was Rob Anderson, and yes, with the Free Alberta strategy, and as he said on here as well, he's the co-chair on the Danielle Smith campaign. And again, just whether people agree with or disagree with Danielle or with the policies or whatnot, we need some clarity. We need that coming from there, because people are reading in a whole heck of a lot of what it might mean and what it might be. Cheryl Dawn saying, Pastor Art, Pawlowski won the Independence Party of Alberta leadership race. Is that the party that Corey started? That's sort of the incarnation. The party vanished for a while and was brought back by Dave as the Alberta Independence Party, and then they changed it to the Independence Party of Alberta. But I am very, very far removed from it now. I was 29 back when I started that party back in 1999. No, 2000, right on 2000. But we'll see where Pawlowski goes with that. I watched the... they have every freedom and right and ability to go with what they like with that. I watched the video of it from their thing. It's to each their own, and it's very religiously based. I mean, before they announced their leadership, though, the whole room went, bowed their head in prayer and everything, which again, they have every right to, and that's fine. But if you're looking at a theocratic basis, I personally, for myself, I have no interest in it. But we'll see where Mr. Pawlowski goes with that. He's certainly a outspoken person and a colorful personality. So it'll keep things lively on the provincial front anyways. So I'm going to speak to one of our sponsors quickly before I get on to ranting about some other stuff here. And that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been sponsoring the Western Standard for quite some time. They're a great group. Guys, I mean, we were talking about earlier, I was out, I never even had to fire a shot, but I had a bear problem in my backyard. I took my shotgun out just to be on the safe side. And, I have that right to do that. Well, there's a government that says I shouldn't have that right. There's a government that wants to take my firearms away. I guess they'd want me to go out there with, a cap gun, if that's allowed, or something like that. Look, we need to stand up for ourselves on so many fronts. And with firearms owners, whether you collect, whether you're a hunter, whether you're a sporting shooter, you've got to join this association, guys, because that's how you get together. That's how you stand up for yourself. That's how you stop them from taking your property. So get out there, check them out, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, all sorts of resources. I mean, not even just lobbying stuff, videos for safe firearm use, upcoming events, things like that. It's well worth it. Get on there. Their website is cssa-cila.org, or just Google Canadian Shooting Sports Association and stand up for yourself. All right. So, something else I've been doing, and as I see Wild Rose noted, I'm back. Yes, I'm back once a week. And, I'm doing other things. I'm still writing columns, and I'm still active. I'm just part-time here with the Standard now. That's all. And, it was just quite a workout doing those 5 days a week. But what I do, and I've never, hidden that, is I like driving Uber. I actually like doing it. It's flexible. I get out, I make a few bucks, and I get to look around, and I get some time to think. So I went through Forest Lawn a bit recently in Calgary. And for people not familiar with Calgary, that's on the east end of town. And it's basically Calgary's roughest residential district. And hey, there's some great people in Forest Lawn. A lot of people are just young families. They're working people. They can't afford to rent or buy a place in the higher ends of town. So they're living in Forest Lawn, but it's a high crime area. It's got a lot of problems. And what they've got going on out there right now, as I'm driving around, they're ripping up perfectly good sidewalks all over the place and putting in friggin' bike lanes. Yes, friggin' bike lanes. That's what Forest Lawn needs. Forest Lawn, that's been gang warfare central for the last few months, The city of Calgary is addressing it by putting in a bunch of bike lanes. Nobody's out there riding bikes. There's this bizarre obsession with ruining good infrastructure that taxpayers in every city's doing it. This isn't just Calgary, but this is, I'm going to go on Calgary's example because of these climate change fanatics, these zealots. It's an anti-car movement. It's not pro-bike. And I mean, I can imagine, Jyoti Gondek, Calgary's extremist mayor, and she is an extremist. She wants an $87 billion climate change plan in Calgary. Just think of her door knocking in Forest Lawn to a concerned citizen as they're ripping up their streets and putting in these bike lanes. The person saying, "Hi, I'm Jyoti Gondek. How have you liked our governance so far?" So, well, I've been waking up every night with drive-by shootings. Oh dear. Well, those bike lanes will traffic calming, and the drive-by shootings will be slower. What? Anything else? Yeah. There's a meth lab next door. Oh no, we like to call that alternative pharmacy. Please, let's be sensitive here. What? Oh, and we made you a new community garden down the road. Yeah, I know there's a tent city in it. Where does it stop? What are your concerns? Oh, oh, by the way, the kiddie park down the road is loaded with syringes. I see, oh, those diabetics. Gee, I wish they'd put those syringes away. Maybe if they rode bikes more, we'd have fewer type 2 diabetics. I mean, that's how disconnected and ridiculous these people are. You see the mayor on the doorstep. Oh, look, there's a person on a bike there. Yeah, he's got a string of catalytic converters around his neck, and he's got another bike next to him. He's a junkie, and he's been robbing us. Forest Lawn doesn't need bike lanes. They need policing. They need addictions treatment. They need a lot of things. But what's the city of Calgary doing? It's ripping roads to shreds and putting in bike lanes that nobody's going to friggin' use. They did that in the west side of the city, too. Either way, I just had to rant. The disconnect, the lack of reality in the minds of these people, because it's just they won't face it. And like I said, it's like our federal government. I'll pivot there. I mean, I'm looking at some of these news stories. The Canadian Tourism Commission paid themselves 5-figure quarantine bonuses. This is in the Western Standard out there. And over the 2.5 years that there was no tourists, we were locked down. This is again, I'm talking about the government saying we fixed the economy because we hired tens of thousands of civil servants. Yeah, and you're giving them these bonuses and they aren't doing a damn thing. But they're in denial. And they're in denial of the crash they're working us towards, the problems we're going to be getting out of these things. It's brutal. It's brutal. And Jet Gorgon saying, yeah, just like the idiots pushing universal basic income. Yeah, that's a failure, guys. It doesn't work. And the universal basic income, that's the real push they like for trying to, the bottom line is it's backdoor socialism, which socialism is just slowed down communism, guys. That's all it is. Universal basic income. Why isn't the world doing it? Because it doesn't friggin' work. Some countries have tried it. Finland tried it. They tried experiments in Winnipeg. It doesn't work. Paying people to sit on their asses just makes more people sit on their asses. You can't keep sucking from the productive and giving to the lazy, and that's what universal basic income does. And some people talk about now some conservative economists have said it's a good idea. It would streamline things. Yeah, it could, but you see, there's a bunch of theoreticals behind it. They say, with all of these programs, you got this welfare program, and you got AISH, and you got, all of these different things that we spend with the 10 different, 100 different government departments. If we just packed it all into one universal basic income, it would save a bunch of money. Yes, if the government had the courage to do that, but we know they don't have the courage to do that. So all they would do is bring in universal basic income on top of all the rest of the programs, because they wouldn't have the balls to come out and say, we're going to pull that program out of your hands. Of course not. They buy votes with that. UBI. It's delusional. And LinkedIn user, so we don't get the names with those. So I see some of the commenters, saying dealers and hard drugs need to be put away for a long time. So they need to be hanged, but I don't think there'd be many takers for that. This is the commenter saying that. I mean, there's where I've differed from a lot of our viewers before, in that I don't believe in giving the state capital punishment or the ability for it. And the reason for it is just like with that stabby monster out in Saskatchewan who was guilty of 69 crimes, and they let him out again, and he killed 10 or 11 more people before they caught him. I didn't shed a tear when I heard he was dead. Good. The world is a better place for it. There's no doubt about that. My problem, though, is I don't want to give the government the power to kill people. I don't. Look how well the government's already served us, guys. Look what they did with, did you think they would come out and seize our bank accounts? Did you think they would lock us in our houses? Did you think they would shut down our businesses? Well, I don't want to give that group of people more power. And you can't give them a power more powerful than the ability to execute citizens. So I don't ever want the government to have that power again. Hey, life sentences, absolutely. I want to see some of those sick buggers locked up, weld the door shut, and die of old age in prison. I just don't want to see the government having the ability to kill people. And Paradoxy saying, yeah, this guy's parole release was managed by government. Yeah, I know. They screwed that up. The parole still has to be fixed. But the thing is, we also have, David Milgaard, who was in jail for decades and wrongly so. And everybody at the time of his conviction would have said, oh, he was definitely guilty, 100% guilty, because people say we just do it when it's 100% guilt. No, guys, the government can't say with 100% certainty on anything. They're incompetent. Lock them up for real. Fix those parole boards. Do something with it. I mean, the other aspect, of course, is that allow people to defend themselves. I mean, we need those firearms. I live in a rural area. I got 40% response times to my house if I have police calls that come in. And Trudeau is saying we don't have the right to defend ourselves with firearms. Yeah, well, I hope I never have to put that to the test. But yes, we do, actually. And as the saying goes, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And a lot of rural homeowners, and I think some urban ones, feel the same way. It takes some of that pressure out as well. But right now, they crack down on people who defend themselves while they are letting these chronic offenders off the hook all the time. And I did a little video rant on my own channel about that, because there was 4 women in Alberta killed in the last year by repeat violent offenders that we have let out. And it's unacceptable. Shane Woolsey saying, I'm a former heroin addict who runs my own company. I like seeing those comments. There's another thing with the addicts, and I'm on their case because we have an addiction epidemic. It's huge. It's problematic. It's a big, big problem. And we need to treat them. They need help. You can't just go cold turkey. It doesn't work that way. Not with meth, not with heroin, not with people when they've sunk to that level. And it's very difficult. The success rate, even with treatment, isn't all that great. But the success rate for those addicts, those poor zombies you see wandering on the street, so they're freaking out or going up and down the medians, it's zero, basically, if we don't intervene and try to help somehow. Now, we got this fanaticism coming with safe consumption sites. Oh, that's what'll fix everything. Safe consumption. No, you're dragging out the inevitable. There's no safe way to take meth. There's no safe way to take non-prescription fentanyl. You're just slowing the poison. Unless you couple it with treatment, you're just dragging out a death at best. And there's some logic to it. Look, we can't treat a guy if he's dead, or woman. So if we can mitigate and keep them, but we got these ideology, and I love the hypocrisy of the hipsters, the urbanists, the downtown people anyways. Calgary's East Village, which is supposed to be the big hip new neighborhood they've been pumping tens of millions of tax dollars into to try and develop into this nice area. And they were going to move one of the safe supervised consumption sites over into their area, and the citizens and residents, all those hipsters and lefties said, not my backyard. No, I don't want them around here. Yeah, go figure, eh? You hypocritical chodes. Look, we got to get realistic with it. And there is problems when you come to safe consumption sites. They draw the addicts in. Can't sugarcoat this. And who follows the addicts? The dealers. And the addicts are desperate. And they will rob anybody who's near them. They're desperate. They're sick. They're in trouble. They'll steal the teeth out of your head if it will get them another fix. Let's be realistic about that. I mean, people keep talking about too, and they're in California, they call them the unhoused now. We're not supposed to say homeless, we're unhoused. Or in Calgary, we say they're vulnerable people. Yes, they're vulnerable, but they're friggin' addicts. They're also that. Dave made a comment on Twitter the other day, and I saw some clown came in because Dave was complaining about, yes, these curb crawlers and how dangerous it is because they walk up and down begging off of cars and drivers in the city all over the place. And somebody says, oh, clearly you hate the poor. No, that had nothing to do with the poor. We have all kinds of programs for the poor. If a person is truly poor, if they're on the rocks, they're in trouble, there are agencies that will feed them, charitable ones and government ones. There are places that will put a roof over their head. Those are there. If you're a junkie in the throes of the last stages of addiction, however, you can't go into those places. You aren't in condition for those places. They don't just simply need a job. They are poor for that. They're addicts. They don't simply need a roof over their house. They will tear the walls down to get the copper pipes and sell them. They need treatment. And like I said, from the commenter, I appreciate that because they're not a lost cause. We can save some of these people. We got to get them in though. They need help. I mean, I wonder about some of these areas anyways, where we can house them. I'm really worried for the winter. It's going to get friggin' cold. And as I said, I drive Uber. I see them all over the city. These guys are going to suffer badly. And we can't put them in our regular shelters. It's not fair. It's not, fair to the people who are in there for other reasons. I kind of wonder, in Calgary's sake, we got that Greyhound bus depot over in the west end of downtown. Nobody lives around there. The building's sitting there empty. It's giant. Could we turn that into just a basic housing place? Concrete walls, simple stuff. They can vomit, they can sleep, but they won't freeze to death and they won't die. And maybe, again, keep as much counseling and ability and options to say, hey, are you ready? Can we get you in to get some help and get you treated and get you back into society? But this world of delusion saying they're just somebody who fell between the cracks, perhaps they did, but they fell between the cracks into meth, heroin, and fentanyl, and they aren't in their right minds, and they are not harmless. They are dangerous to themselves and others, and we need to start taking some hard reality checks when it comes to people like that. And as I said, I'm sympathetic. I mean, I'm open about things. I always talk about my personal things. I'm not above those things. I'm an alcoholic. It took many, many, many meetings in church basements before I finally stopped drinking, and I haven't had a drink in years now. But I needed help. I didn't do it alone. I did it with the support of a lot of other alcoholics. And I still, thankfully, didn't fall as far or as low as a lot of people did when they're addicted to something. But our cities, they live in this state of denial. Let's keep sugarcoating it. Let's keep calling them vulnerable people and unhoused people. Guys, they're addicts. And until you admit what they are, we're not going to get to the solution of it. Speaking of denial, so we got the second annual Aboriginal Truth and Reconciliation Day coming at the end of the month. When are they going to dig at Kamloops? I listened to somebody on a radio interview the other day, still going on, 215 children are buried. They were murdered in Kamloops. Oh, bullshit. All right. Dig some holes. Dig some holes. It's been, 16 months now? 0 bodies recovered, guys. If there really were murders, maybe there were. I can't say 100% there weren't. And this is absurd. Because anywhere else, if there was a murder, the police are going to get in there. You don't say yes or no to an investigation. You don't have a choice anymore. We're going to investigate. We're going to find the bodies. We're going to do an autopsy. We're going to find and charge the perpetrators. But with the residential schools, and yes, Jaime Rubenstein wrote on it. He said, what missing children? Because there aren't. I mean, that's the other thing. Where are the families of all these murdered children? Shouldn't there be parents or brothers and sisters or cousins saying, hey, this person disappeared when we went to that school? Well, they aren't there. We've got to get in there and exhume and settle this because it's insane. We've got churches that are still burning. There was another one lit up north of Fort Mac that only harmed the First Nations community because they had a large number of people that went to that church. So let's get to the facts then. If there really are a bunch of buried bodies, I want to see some people charged. I want to see an investigation. And if there aren't, then let's start getting that reality check on what really happened with residential schools. I'm not saying they were a walk in the park, but we're living on a bunch of mythology and ghost stories that were told by children 60 years ago and calling it fact. You know what oral history, another term for oral history is? Fiction. Even the most well-meaning people, I mean, you see, we've tried to accommodate because First Nations never got to a point of a written language. It's just the way it is. I mean, every society came from somewhere and they evolved to a point to get written languages, and the First Nations hadn't gotten there yet. They were Neolithic, actually, in terms of development on the plains. They were nomadic. It's not faulting them for that. That's just the way it is. But that also means you don't have an accurate recent history. And because of that, and because of problems with literacy later on in that, we've had judges ruling, and I think it was the Marshall decision, basically saying we have to take their oral histories as fact, and we can utilize them legally. No, we can't. I'm sorry, but we can't. I mean, remember the telephone game? You get a circle of people and just whisper something into one person's ear and going around, and by the time you've got around 8 people, the message is so garbled it's nothing at all like it was the first time around. And that's just in a minute or two. We're trying to give credence to oral histories from people from 80 years ago. We need physical fact. We need to get to the bottom of what really has happened. And here's, getting onto that. It's speaking of politicization, because that's what I'm wondering. Shouldn't this be beyond the others? This was a story. Only a third of Canadians surveyed said they trust the RCMP's national leadership. They don't trust Brenda Lucki. This is our top cop in Canada. Well, yeah, when you get stuff like this, again, how is it that we have apparently 215 murdered children buried somewhere and we haven't started a real forensic investigation of it yet? Shouldn't she be standing up there saying, we will send those Mounties down there and start digging? See what the hell happened? Well, she hasn't. She's too busy interfering with investigations on some of the largest shootings we've ever had. Here's the beauty. You know, Poilievre is getting into a lot of trouble too for talking about the Bank of Canada and going after the governor of it and things like that. But listen to the statements from them. This is, a press release saying could be some bumps along the way to beating inflation as they're getting ready to raise interest rates yet again. Bumps along the way. You know, when a person's losing their home or business, that's more than a bump along the way. It's bankruptcy. Don't sugarcoat this. And these guys, they don't understand, and they're politicized as well. They're not speaking with economic reality. All right. So Lisa Webster saying, seeing as the RCMP that abducted kids from home to be taken to residential schools, do you really think a legit investigation would take place? The elders speaking out are ignored and brushed under the carpet. Come on. Look into the history of it. 150,000 children attended residential schools. Of them, the bulk were voluntary. They weren't taken from their homes. This is well documented. And then most of the children after that came to schools that weren't residential. They were not snatched from their homes. That's a myth, okay? I mean, some of that happened a little bit. I think it was in the 1920s when they brought about, because truancy laws, every child had to attend school in Canada. Every one of them. That's equal rights, guys. And if they lived in a rural area without a school nearby it, they had to be picked up and taken to them. But this mythology that's going on around here, we've got the records, we've got the stuff. Do I trust the RCMP? Though that's the second part of that, and that's fair enough out of Linda as well, or Lisa, I should say. Sorry, Lisa. No, I don't trust the RCMP a heck of a lot. But we have other police forces, we have other investigators, we can strike commissions, we can have oversight. Supposedly, there are 215 murdered children, and we don't have an investigation. And that is wrong. And you know what? So that leaves it free for me to read into it as much as I can. Then I can claim that there were 0 children murdered, or I can claim there were 215. We don't know. There's no evidence. All there was some anomalies where it just sounds like there's been some good work showing that it might be of an old septic system. There was a tooth found. They said, look at the tooth of a child. They studied it. No, that was an animal. There was a child's rib found, they said. Oh, but we lost that rib. Oral history. We got to get in there. Got to see what's happening with it. Okay, so, I'll finish with one other thing, too, with, the province is still talking, and I understand, Queen Elizabeth has passed away. I'm not a big monarchist myself, but I still did respect Queen Elizabeth. She did hold the office with dignity, and, ran it as well as she could. I don't have a beef with the royal family. I don't want to spend more tax dollars on them. I certainly never want them to have any real authority over our lives beyond anything symbolic. But she passed on, and I can respect that and people mourning it, and she was a part of history. Now, whether or not the province should make it a holiday on Monday, no, I don't think so. Have a day of observance, absolutely, and do formal things. But come on, it really costs, and that's reality, a whole lot. We don't need to shut the province down to pay our respects to the Queen, even though we still can without doing so. But either way, we'll see what happens. A lot of people pressuring, what's your decision? That's the thing that gets me annoyed at the province. I mean, if you're not going to have a day, which is fine by me, say it, Kenny. How hard is this? Why you always got to drag your butt on everything? Everything's like pulling teeth with that guy. Man. I just see Dave popping in for a second, but we might have something breaking or something. Whenever I see Dave come into the show, I know we're just about wrapped up. Often it means there's something going on. He's confirming for me. There is no holiday for Alberta. Okay, so I've been on here for a minute.
I just see Dave popping in for a second.
So, okay, thanks for that update. So there won't be one. And as I said, it doesn't mean, in my view anyways, that it's disrespecting the Queen or the royal family. It just means that perhaps it just wouldn't be a productive way to do things. And people can still show respect and observe the passing of a woman who really, it's going to be strange to imagine life without her there. I mean, I'm 51 years old, and of course, she was on the throne for decades before I was even born. It's a turning point. It's a historic one. And Well, we'll watch for it. Okay, so I'm going to be back next week at noon. Plus, let's watch. We got other productions going on. Sean Newman has got his podcast that comes on. The Pipeline is going to be on tonight. I'll be going on that with Derek and Nigel tonight. And also Melanie Risden has got her regular show where she digs deeply into a lot of things and does great with some of those investigative issues and things like that. So thanks for joining the me for this second episode of the reboot of things. I really did miss you guys. It's good to be back and live. As I said, we got some blurriness, we get some hiccups, but it's okay. Make sure to take out a membership. That's how we pay those bills around here, guys. And if you're looking to sponsor things, hey, send me a note. You know, we can promote your business or service on here. So thanks for joining me today, guys, and I will see you in 1 week sharp or on the Pipeline tonight.